Good afternoon. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Elwyn. Thank you, Cato. It's an enormous pleasure for Ellie and me to splendidly lunch with you and for me to have been invited by Michael and Jan to talk to you for a few minutes about the hugely influential 8-mile, actually 8.2-mile BC Electric tram line between Marpole and Steveston. As a still good friend of mine insists, why do you write and talk about streetcars? Why trams or interurbans? It's easy. I grew up in Vancouver's Mount Pleasant, our house 2 blocks from Vancouver's Mount Pleasant streetcar barns. As a 5-year-old in 1942 with my friends, the barns were a superlative attraction for kids. Playing in and around the car barns, one would often be gifted with a pack of transfers by an off-duty streetcar conductor, and so began my BC Electric archive, which today, as Ellie knows well, has outgrown house and home, but has allowed me to write 4 books on BC Electric streetcars and trams. The first one, commissioned for Expo 86, laid out by Michael and much more, and with a preface by my friend Jimmy Pattison, and you saw the Victoria books and Vancouver's glory years. There's another book, and that's The Perfect Little Streetcar System, and that's about North Vancouver. So, is it trams or interurbans? Growing up, it was always trams. My mother said, oh, we have to take the tram. We're going out to the water gardens at Garden City Station in Lulu Island. Okay, we took trams. Whereas today, we tend to call the big vehicles interurbans. I think there's a weightiness, a gravity about them. After all, they are 35 tons each. Vancouver is young. As we all know, the city was incorporated on April 6, 1886. However, are you aware that Coca-Cola preceded us by 8 days? And of course, as Michael has already asserted, Richmond, oh, it trumped, if you'll pardon the expression, both of them. Here we are in Richmond. It was incorporated November 10, 1879. Richmond, Lulu Island and Sea Island was a veritable Garden of Eden, not populated as it is today by more than 250,000 people. Lulu Island, 15 miles wide and 5 miles between the Fraser River's arms, 47 square miles in all, was evocatively described by newspapers riding the first trains across the island, probably, most likely, seeing Richmond for the first time themselves. I'm quoting from 1902, when the train started with CPR, and then a little bit from 1905, when the Interurban began. Quoting, as soon as Eburn is past, Marpole, the fields, rich, level, and luxuriant, at once claim attention. Even were it pitch dark, these fields would stimulate the curiosity and engage the attention of a passenger. Acres upon acres of beautiful white and red clover are passed. The exquisite perfume from the myriad of blossoms is something that defies description. All the perfumes of Arabia would not rival the almost intoxicating odors that float through the open car windows as mile after mile of this rich clover is passed. This is Lulu Island. It is an interesting, still quoting, study to watch the facial expression of some of the passengers in the Steveston car as this district is being passed. The man who for months, perhaps years, has been accustomed to the smell of the city's smoke, cinders, and asphalt, leans back in his seat, throws out his chest, and fills his lungs full of scented ozone. When have you last done that in Richmond? It is no ordinary growth of clover that is harvested on Lulu Island. On several fields, big, husky teams were toiling to track or to drag a mower through the luxuriant mass, while in one particularly heavy growth, 2 teams were hitched to the mower. Think of it, ye agriculturalists from the effete East. 2 teams on one mower, and both pulling hard at that. Then the oats, this is still all Lulu Island, are worth going miles to see. Fields of them stretching as far as the eye can see, the stems growing so thick and close together that one wonders how they all managed to grow up out of the fertile soil. Nearing Steveston, some particularly fine fields of oats are seen. It was on one of these fields that the record yield of 115 bushels of oats to the acre was obtained last year. That would have been 1901. Meditate on that for a while and compare it with what is considered a heavy yield in the East, when 65 bushels are obtained. Thinking of Peterborough. And then marvel not that the fertile delta is called the Garden of British Columbia. Author Leslie J. Ross memorably called it Child of the Fraser. 1905. The opening up of one of the most fertile tracts of farming land in the province is the recognized necessity that compelled the construction of the Lulu Island Railway. That this line was needed, there can be no doubt. Thousands of acres of farming land hitherto dependent on stagecoach and wagon connection with Vancouver are now tapped in their very richest parts. And what is more important than all to the dairy farmer, the markets can now be reached in about half an hour, as against some 3 hours in the old way. By the way, by the 1930s, 9 major dairies were operating in Richmond. At our house at 2631 Quebec Street in Vancouver, we took Frazee Farms, created by Jake Grauer. And every morning, the horse-drawn vehicle would draw up, and the chap would stop, the horse too, of course, and deliver our milk. Frazee Farms indeed. Notice the early writers, and I've gone through everything that I can find about them, they said nothing about salmon. Who here will readily believe, I may not, that Hugh Boyd was awarded a medal for the best wheat grown in the British Empire here on Lulu Island in 1887. This is a different Richmond. And then there's Steveston. Lulu Island began attracting settlers in the 1860s. Steveston is named for Manoah Steeves, who arrived with his family 1 year before incorporation, 1878, and began a dairy farm. His son Herbert actually developed the town site, which became Steveston in 1889. Salmon canning began on the river in 1871. By the 1890s, and I took this figure because it was the largest one I could find, there were 45 canneries, about half of them at Steveston. In 1901, by the way, Steveston had a population of 2000. Each summer, large numbers of Japanese, Chinese, First Nations, and Euro-Canadian fishers and cannery workers descended on the village. The fishery, as many of you know, also supported a significant boat building and shipbuilding industry. Sailing ships from around the world visited the harbor to take on cargoes of canned salmon. The year 1913 will always be remembered as the most fantastic salmon run in Steveston history. And as many of you will know, the Gulf of Georgia cannery, built in 1894, and at one time the largest cannery in BC, is open for everyone to visit as a National Historic Site in Steveston. Now, if you take your handout, I'd like to talk to it before we look at some photos. First item, 1902. The CPR arrived in Vancouver in 1887, and it did something that not many people know it did. It built two lines. At about Main Street on the waterfront, it built straight in along the coast as we know it today on Burrard Inlet. But at the same time, they drove the line across Carroll Street, Hastings, through the south side of False Creek, right in front of what would have been Kitsilano Pool, right out to Trafalgar Street. Steam locomotives went right out to Trafalgar Street. There are many plans that abound that show harboring facilities being contemplated there. At the same time, CPR was always on the lookout for a possibility, for a strategic possibility. They took a charter, an old charter, Vancouver and Lulu Island Railway, used that charter to build out to Steveston, and this is how it operated. It was called the Sockeye Express. It would start where we would expect it to start today at the waterfront, with the locomotive pointing to Stanley Park. Then it would back up to Main Street. And then it would take that other line through what became CPR Yard, the Roundhouse, and so on, False Creek, across Kitsilano Trestle, and then up through Arbutus, Kerrisdale, and out to Steveston. Some heavy grades, but they did this. They lost interest quickly. They lost interest. Let me read you why. When the CPR bought the Esquimalt to Nanaimo Railway on Vancouver Island from millionaire coal miner James Dunsmuir in 1905 and consolidated their hold on Vancouver Island, the strategic value of the Vancouver and Lulu Island Railway to Steveston was lost. It meant nothing to the CPR, and the BC Electric was only too willing to lease it and expand it. Many of you will have seen that at 22nd and Arbutus, King Edward sweeps up the hill eastward. BC Electric added a track, they never used it for streetcars or interurbans, up to Granville, and thus Shaughnessy Heights was built, with equipment brought up through Arbutus and up to Granville Street. BC Electric on the way. And you can see that. They leased it. Took them $180,000 to electrify, and they did that very, very quickly. In 1905, July 4, I thought I'd throw the next one in because transportation was now centered on Vancouver. The last steamship up to New Westminster, and that had been a big service, ended, as you see there, in 1908. Minaroo track. Minaroo was the king's favorite horse, thus Minaroo. The track you can see when it was opened, and you'll see on the map on the other side, there is a loop that goes in there. And there's one photo that exists of a long interurban train, BC Electric, of course, on that loop. Now, Minaroo was shut down at the beginning of the First World War, reopened in 1920 as Brighouse because Brighouse owned the land. Just a little bit of history about that. Racetrack specials were always a very big feature of the Vancouver to Steveston line. 1913, that's between Marpole and Vancouver, and that was so necessary. That was expanding like no one really could have foreseen. Big years began in about late 1902, 3, and 4, and just boomed, and Vancouver was 100,000 people by 1910. Then we come to 1913. That's again something I thought you would be interested. At the southern foot of number 5 Road, Woodward's Landing Ferry began. Now, in 1914, and you'll see pictures of this, of course, the Interurban going to Steveston began at a station in Vancouver called Granville Street Depot. It was very inconvenient, and I'll leave describing it until the photo, and then you'll see very clearly how it worked. Something had to be done. So a new depot was built in 1914, and if you can believe it, this is how it was done. Here's Granville Bridge, the old one. Some of you may remember it. You came onto Granville Bridge, of course from Granville, but also from 4th. Well, the Interurban went to Kitsilano, so at 3rd, BC Electric built a double track up to the bridge. Not quite. They built a beautiful depot there. You'll see photos of it. And this was a small masterpiece. How long did it last? It lasted till 1923. Why? Because in that year, we went from left-hand drive to right-hand drive. That depot on the west side, attached to the bridge as it were, allowed people to walk out of the depot onto a waiting streetcar and down to Hudson's Bay, if you'll pardon the expression. So that was a wonderful thing. But when we changed to right-hand drive, this meant passengers would have to cross in the teeth of other traffic on the left lane or on the right lane. The left lane coming towards you now, and this simply couldn't be done. It was far too dangerous. So this beautiful station lasted only 9 years, and the final station for the Steveston line went to, as I showed there in 1923, went to the corner of Richards and Seymour Streets. In 1920, the Marpole depot that so many people got used to opened. And this is the point I think that I really must ask. How many rode the Interurban Vancouver, Marpole, Steveston? Very few of us, about 4 of us. All right. 1924, Lansdowne Track opened, and it was exactly where the shopping mall is today. 1924, this is more important than it seems. By that time, trucks had become prevalent. There had been bridges at the end of Sea Island and over to Marpole since 1889. So that Interurban, which didn't have any passenger seats and which took express, all kinds of material, flowers, dairy, and so on, that ended that year. So that was a signal that things that were motor-driven were making the edge of the wedge. 1928, Lansdowne Track became the airport, and it would stay as the airport until 1931, when our airport began. 1929, May 19th, Steveston's beautiful depot, a CPR-style depot, was destroyed by fire, and tickets then were purchased at Tom Leslie's store. Tom Leslie did groceries, the usual. Post office was there. He did real estate. You wanted to buy there, you went there. And so that's where you got your tickets now. And in 1929, this is the one thing I'd like to have done, and I've seen pictures of it. From 1929 until 50, eat your hearts out, BC ferries. A car ferry ran from the foot of 7th Avenue in Steveston to Sydney. Twice a day, the Interurban, a regular scheduled Interurban, met it. If it was a little late, Tom Leslie would send someone out to the end of 7th and say, it's a little late, please hold the ferry. It's absolutely true. There is a beautiful picture I've seen, I don't have it, can't show it to you, of the wharf with the vehicles trundling onto the vessel. You say, how was the vessel, the Motor Princess? Beautiful. Built in 1923 by Yarrows in Victoria. The first diesel vehicle, first diesel vessel on either the Canadian or American coast. The fittings, I've seen pictures inside, were lush. They were really lovely. Here was our first car ferry. Can you imagine getting on? You've played a round of golf at Quilchena. You get on at 29th, and where are you going? I'm going over to Victoria. That way? Of course, of course. You rode out to Steveston, and the connection was, nothing's going to be missed, the ferry will be held, whatever, and then onto the ferry, over to Sydney, and your brother-in-law is picking you up in Sydney and taking you down to wherever in Victoria. Imagine, for 21 years, that was done. And the Interurban was very much part of it. 1939, the Steveston Y, you can see it on your map, taken out of service. That used to be used by the steam train, but just for 2+ years. The steam train would come or drive straight down, locomotives don't drive, straight south, and then would back into Steveston. By the way, that section, that backing into Steveston, and that's where the Interurbans went, that is a trail today. Well, 1942 took a long time. A new station opened, and it certainly wasn't posh, but it was there. You'll see pictures of it. 1945, Brighouse becoming the metropolis of Richmond. Mail service was then removed from it, given to mail trucks, of course. Let me go back to 1916 with you. I missed that the first time around. Let me describe for you, in case you're not aware of it, what Eburn really was when it was Eburn. Eburn was the northeast corner of Sea Island and what we call Marpole. And what we call Marpole until 1929 was part of the municipality of Point Grey. So Eburn, that corner of Sea Island closest to Marpole, and Marpole, that was Eburn. And we finally got over it officially in 1916, as you can see. Well, the rest of it is pretty straightforward, I think. The very last car, and I'm looking at 1958, was the 1207. It came into, well, it actually came into Marpole first, and I think I've described everything really quite cogently there, I hope. CPR took over the operation of the line as well as to New Westminster. BC Hydro, BC Electric's successor, had declined to lease it or release it. And I had fun looking for this date, but I knew you would want it. The bridge, when did railway last operate over it? May 25th, 2015. I think, Cato, we could start with the photos. That's the CPR station, and would you notice what looks like bracing over top of the track? Initially, this was all through the 8 miles of the line out to Steveston. The ground was so movable, so soggy, kept rainwater in it so well that it was felt this was necessary. This is one of those freight cars, not a passenger car, and this is a CPR station, the one that burnt down, as I said. You're on First. The track on First is still, on Moncton is still there. Number 1 road is to the left, and here's the station from the other end, and an Interurban has just come in from Vancouver. Thank you. And Cato, would you go back to one more, please? There are about 3 photos of the CPR steam train between 1902 and 1905. That is really the best. You can see the depot over top of the locomotive's cab. It's very much in Steveston Depot, and you can see even some homes in the background. So this is probably right at the very end of service. This is a photo well known but undated. So 1905. Okay, Cato, thank you so much. This is a different view. There aren't many. This is from Moncton Street, looking north. You see the depot in behind, and I wanted you to see the freight building because this was a feature of the line. Much freight was carried. Okay. This is the new station. You're on Moncton, you're looking to the south, and the station's on the left. As you can see, it's not much more than a platform and somewhat of a shelter. Okay? That's it, looking north. Moncton Street in front of the tram, and you would wait there, and the Interurban ran every hour. Between Vancouver and Marpole, every half hour. You have a facsimile ticket in front of you on the table for 13 cents, and you may be wondering what that was. That was the final fare to Steveston from Marpole, 13 cents. This is south and west of the station. In other words, if you know Steveston today and didn't know it 30 years ago, you wouldn't believe that this was there. But you'll remember the canneries, the shipbuilding. So the tracks went far beyond and devolved into different spurs to deal with all the industry that was in Steveston. Ah, the Interurbans were beautiful. They were beautiful. Jade green with gold lettering, and each one had a name. There were 16 of them. BC Electric built them in their own shop in New Westminster between 1904 and 1907. 16 of them, and lovely colored glass above the windows, and they were double-ended. As you can see by that monstrous pilot, which would more than catch one cow, I'm sure, it had that same configured cow catcher at the other end. Now, when did this change? As I mentioned before, and as most of you probably know, we were really gaining in population. We had to be able to couple the interurbans, make 2-car trains, occasionally 3 cars. So those big cowcatchers, pilots, had to be removed, and end doors had to be cut in so that there could be communication from car to car. But for that brief period of time, 1905 to 1912, these cars flashing through. I would give my whole CD collection to be able to see one doing it right now. All right, Cato. Now, this tells you where from 1905 to 1914 the station was, Granville Street Station. Can you see Granville Bridge in the background? You're looking east. You're looking east, and you can see just a bit of the roof and flashing of the small depot to the left. How did you get to this depot? Oh, there was a wonderful staircase off the bridge, and you clambered down that staircase, and you came here, and you got on your Interurban. This was always a difficulty for the line out to Steveston. You never got downtown. Even with the new depot, it was at Richards and Seymour. You still had to get on to another streetcar to get down to Woodward's, Spencer's, Eaton's, and the Bay. So that's what you had to do, and you really came down the steps to this station. Notice, the end doors have been cut in. This is now multiple unit Interurban. The name's gone, the number's there, and look at some of the staff. Conductor, motorman, of course, and brakeman. In Victoria, for their Interurban line, they call the motorman motorneer. Motorman sounds better. Cato. One more look at what the cars look like. There wasn't a better Interurban car in Canada or the United States, and that's not just lightly said. This was the era of the Interurban. It was a short era, basically from the 1890s till early 1920s, and then we got automobiles. The Interurban era could be called as long as 30 years, but no longer, which makes it even more extraordinary that our Interurban lasted till 1958. By the way, on your sheet with the dates, I set in the date of Oak Street Bridge purposely. This is a sea change. This changed everything. This was the last Interurban car, Interurban operation in Canada. It was the last, as far as the U.S. was concerned, except the one that ran from Portland to Catanzaro in Oregon. Cato. That's the station. This is Granville. You're looking north towards downtown, and it's still left-hand drive. So the streetcar to take you downtown is going to come on the tracks that you see most easily. The Interurbans are just on the other side of this. Oh, the timbers that went to holding this building up. Newspapers were full of architects' drawings of this. This is almost like the Louvre. This was special. But you can see when we changed the rule of the road in 9 years, people would have had to cross that track to get over to this side. And this was what amounts to 3rd and Granville, whereas we came onto the bridge from 4th. Cato? That's the west side. Fine looking piece of work. And next, who is everybody there? Wouldn't it be interesting to know? Maybe an ancestor of one of you. Maybe someone you didn't want to hear about again. Who knows? But there it is. That's the terminal I grew up with. This is the one from 1923 to the end, 1952, when Vancouver Marpole stopped. Now, you're looking at that and you're saying, Henry, this is not a very prepossessing work of architecture, is it? It was something else, and BC Electric bought it, obviously, reworked it, refurbished it. Crews stayed in there. There were sleeping facilities on the top floor, and there was a good-sized waiting room, and of course the Interurban stopped in the middle of the street to let you on. Here it is. It's on Davie. Granville Cross is in the background. You're looking west. And the person taking the picture is virtually in front of that depot. This is the closest the Steveston line ever got to central downtown Vancouver. Okay? This is at 22nd and Arbutus. This is car 1207. When it was built, it was named Steveston. There were 3 interurban cars which operated on that first day in 1905, Eburn, Richmond, and Steveston. Richmond became 1205. Eburn, 1206. 1207 was Steveston. On the first day, and it still exists. Okay? That's the inside. And it looks like that. It's wood. A section for non-smokers with rattan seats, and a section for smokers with little metal butting receptacles and wooden seats. You wouldn't want those smokers to burn up the rattan. Impossible. Ah, this is a picture by Vic Sharman. This is 29th station on the Vancouver Marpole section. Was there a station on the southbound side as well? There was, but it wasn't a covered one. It was a simple platform. I disliked the station massively, as much as I like Quilchena Golf Course there, and of course here. I despised it, and I don't think you have any idea why. My music lessons were downtown. I came home this way, and where you just saw the 1207, it's going to make that little curve, and it's going to run alongside Quilchena Golf Course. The motormen knew. They all knew. Passengers knew. This was Indianapolis Speedway. And no one wanted to stop at 29th because the interurban car would have had to slow down and stop. That's terrible. So you hoped, I wasn't the only one, I might have been the most vociferous one, but as a kid I hoped that no one would stop or get on there, get off, and that interurban would, how fast? They could go 45, 50 miles an hour easily, but rarely had the opportunity to do so. Okay. Well, Kerrisdale Arena's built. You can see it in the far right. It was built in 1949. So this is soon after. The service stopped in 52. This is Kerrisdale. You're looking north, 41st Avenue. The station on the right was quite substantial. The one on the left, coming from downtown, not so substantial because it didn't have to be. People were not in the main getting on there and going south. They were getting off. Whereas here at 41st on the northbound, they were getting on in the proverbial droves. Okay? This is, again, 41st and Boulevard, and this is on the very last day, which I've flagged on your list. Very last day, and it's a 2-car train, and it could well be heading for Steveston, because the line to Steveston had another 6 wonderful years to run. Okay. Oh, I know what it is, even if you can't see it. There was freight, of course, right to the end, even after BC Hydro got into the game. Always freight along the line, and this was an example, or is an example, of one of the electric freight locomotives. And isn't that something? We talk about electric, no fossil fuels. Good grief! In 1905, we were doing electric interurbans. Wasn't that good? Okay. This is looking south, and the interurban has just left Marpole. So let's just go to Marpole. Now there's Marpole before the new depot was built in 1920. And here's the old depot. Pretty typical, a shelter. Here's a BC Electric boxcar. This later became a grain elevator. And here is one of the cars, pre-1912, still without its ends open for coupling to other interurbans. That's the Marpole Depot that people knew from 1920 to 1958. And this is very special. It has all the railway serious appurtenances. You'll see that, the semaphore, but you see something over here as well. This was Vancouver's fabled, and I say so, because so many people talked about it at the time and later. This was the Oak Street streetcar. Many photos have been taken or were taken before it stopped running in '51. Many photos were taken along Oak Street, and they are something to see today. Oak Street has developed beyond anything that anyone my age could have ever foreseen. So here's a very comprehensive picture of Marpole, lots of wires going in all directions. Okay. Here's an Interurban coming into Marpole, some nice color, probably coming in from Steveston, could be coming in from New Westminster. It'll be heading downtown. And notice, no Marpole loop yet, but let's try the next one. It'll be the one after this. Let me explain. This is a Steveston train, 2 cars. It's about ready to go. This is white flags. Now, part of the operation was Marpole to New Westminster, built in 1909. It was part of the V&LI system. And at rush hour, off work, I think many of you will know that there were sawmills, planing mills all along the Fraser River in Vancouver and even into Burnaby. And special, non-scheduled interurbans would run along there at workers, ending the day time, and pick them up and take them where they wanted to go. The white flags denoted that extra. Okay. Now you have the Marpole loop over here, so we're getting into bus time, and here's train coming in from Steveston. There's the bridge, swing span. Oh, I'll just hold it there. Swing span in the middle, trestle work on either side, and the next picture is choice. Oak Street Bridge being built. And this is taken from the motorman's view in an Interurban, or a tram, of course, going to Steveston. Okay? I think you've probably concluded, and it probably doesn't need saying, the Steveston Interurban line passenger service stayed on as long as it did until the completion of Oak Street Bridge, and a bus system could evolve, probably evolved in planning ahead of time. That's what kept it in operation years and years and years. The Interurban line that ran south from Bellingham to Mount Vernon, a challenging piece of interurban work, it stopped in 1933. We hung on to ours for a long time. That's looking south from Oak Street Bridge. Next. That's climbing the hill to the bridge going to Steveston. Okay. And here it comes. And this station, someone asked me today, why was it called Tuck's? It was called Tuck's without an apostrophe because Mr. Tuck was the original bridge tender. And it was named sensibly after him, that first station. By the way, it drove conductors crazy, especially on a 2-car interurban train filled with people. It's just left Marpole. You're starting your walk, punching tickets and so on, and someone wants to get off at Tuck's, which is about 3 minutes after leaving Marpole. How do you deal with these people? All right. Bridgeport was a big, big stop. Very big. Next. Well, this is still at Bridgeport, or again at Bridgeport. This track intrigued me. This spur track headed along Bridgeport on the north side and it went almost to the river. I often dreamt as a kid of seeing a train there. And of course I didn't. Sexsmith Station. This is right in the middle of what is now Garden City Road. Right in the middle. Okay. This is Cambie. And right about where the photographer is, just behind him, is where the substation was built. You have that on your chronological list as well. It was right here. Next. Lansdowne. Next. And here is the spur. You've got it on your map. And I should mention now, done by a good friend who did all the maps in my first book. There's a copy of my first book over there. Dave Royce, the late Dave Royce, an extraordinary person. Engineer, map drawer, cartographer par excellence, and pastor of the gospel. Now, this, if you know Richmond, this is on that lovely wide curve as you're driving down Garden City, and it settles beautifully over to Granville Avenue. And I know you say to yourself, why is this so beautiful when I have to make sharp right-hand turns everywhere else in the world? It's because it was built for CPR's steam locomotives to go around slowly. Garden City Station. Okay. Well, number 3 road, Brighouse. This was a big stop. And you're looking west. Go right away to the next one, Cato, please. Now you're looking east. See the station, you see a boxcar in the siding, and this is number 3 road. And the first McDonald's restaurant, it's just to the right. First McDonald's restaurant in Canada. This is an interurban train. Those are all interurbans, even the first one, which is an express interurban. And those folks are all going to Brighouse. They're all going to the track. And there's a large loop. This is one of the few pictures at that point. Automobile included. Okay. Riverside. Lulu. And there's the Big Bend. This is Granville. This is Railway Avenue. And this right-of-way, I'm going to refer to it in a few moments. And of course, you're looking north. This is taken right as the motorman stops at McAllen Road. George Bergson said to me in 1955, we were in school together, he said, you know, I don't think anybody's ever taken pictures of the stations. He lived at 46th and Main. I lived at 60th. So we got on our bikes, cameras, and we drove out, and we took pictures of all the stations on the Steveston line in 1955. And this is one of them. I don't remember her name, but she looks very pleased to be waiting for the Interurban. So we're going straight down now. Here we go, Cato. This is from the Interurban motorman's front end. Next. Well, you can see what that is. Branscombe. This is, yes, Woodward's. Cottages. Yes. Next. And this is at Steveston, at the very end of the line. Moncton Street in the background. And the beautiful 1220 sits in its wonderful, wonderful building just across from here. And the single track is still across the road. Next. Last trip. This is the 1 a.m. trip. On the last day of scheduled service. It's just arrived in Marpole, so it's about 1:25. The place is, the Interurban is packed. It's full of silly people like me. Someone took a picture, it's somewhere, I don't have it in my possession, of me, and I have a gray suit on. I'm looking sparkling, I'm looking totally out of place, tie and whatnot, and I think I was going, that was my graduating year at UBC, and I think I was going to have my photograph taken. But that was the last Interurban 1225. And you might say, it's too bad it's not around. Yes, it is. I'll tell you in a moment. It's very much around. As a matter of fact, starting the first Sunday in May, you can ride it. Talked to him many, many times. Laurie Love. He was conductor on the last scheduled train, and there he looks. There he is. He looks all too happy, but we'll let him take it. And I think this is my last picture. As your note says, a dinner was had at Brighouse United Church. Transportation president of the BC Electric, S. Sigmundson, gave a great speech, apparently, widely reported in all our media, as they were at that time. And the trains have returned. Two of them, 2 interurban cars in each, and here's 1207, which still exists right here. People are going home. The depot will be shut very shortly. Cato, I think that's it. It is indeed. Now, a couple words at the very end. Now then, what's left? What's still to be seen? Marvelously, Exhibit A is in Steveston. And I don't mean just the original track on Moncton Street, just east of number 1 road, but Interurban car 1220, resplendent in its own purpose-built exhibition structure, open regularly for us to relish, and the car is on the original track alignment. Exhibit B, this is so exciting. I'm excited by it, is surely the original right-of-way from north of McAllen Road, where we saw our waiter for the Interurban sitting, south, reconstituted as a splendid walkway. It's beautiful. You might say, what's beautiful about a straight line blacktop? I don't care. It's beautiful. It's very nice. Along the way, if you look carefully, you'll see to the west 3 garden sheds, each on widely separated properties, painted in the same colors as the original stations on the line. And I know what you'll say, no, it's not. It's a garden shed. But there are 3 on different disconnected properties and very close. But there's more, and I close. In Cloverdale, the Fraser Valley Historical Railway Society, of which I'm a founding board member and historian in residence, operates 3 interurban cars. 1225, which made the very last revenue trip between Marpole and Steveston. Car 1231, the last interurban car ever to even run on BC Electric track. And 1304, the former Chilliwack and Royal interurban car. The 4th, that's the prize. Car 1207. It operated on the Steveston line's opening day, and it was new. And on the last day, 53 years later, and it survives the only one of BC Electric's new Westminster-built cars, the car originally named Steveston, the quintessential symbol of the opening up of Richmond to the world. It's 120 years old, and it began operating when Vancouver was 19 years old. Our other 3 interurban cars operate because of the massive restoration projects that had to be endeavored and developed for each one in turn. Our society anticipates that the full restoration and rehabilitation process for car 1207 Steveston will take approximately 4 years to complete, with costs approaching $800,000. This is an ambitious project, but one that we believe is well worth the effort to preserve such a vital part of Richmond's transit heritage. We invite anyone interested in providing support to assist with this important legacy restoration project to contact our society. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon. A real pleasure for me. Thank you. Thank you.